Let's go get some groceries. My name is Dan Chabanoff. I'm one of the test editors at Bicycling, and I'm going to talk about our 2023 Bike of the Year. Every year Bicycling, we do our annual Bike Awards issue. We come up with a list, and we have to decide what is that one bike that we're just really stoked on. And in 2023, it is the Specialized Globe Haul ST. This bike packs 419 pounds of hauling capacity into a very compact frame. It's ready for grocery getting, errands, commuting. You can even put a kid on it. It's basically a bike that is designed to replace a car. Not necessarily every car that you own, but it is maybe designed to replace a second car. And that's kind of one of the reasons why we picked this as our Bike of the Year, because we are really excited about a bike that allows riders to replace car miles with bike rides. I was the tester that originally reviewed the bike, and I wrote the full written review. You can go read it on our website. It's like 4,000 words. I had a lot to say about this bike. So what solidified this as Bike of the Year for me, and why I pushed for it to be Bike of the Year, was I had to go and run some errands. I had to do some grocery shopping. For a combination of reasons, I had to take the car. I couldn't do it on the haul. I remember being frustrated looking for parking. I remember being frustrated going to the grocery store. I remember being frustrated coming back, because for a few months leading up to that, every time I had to go run one of these errands, I was on my bike, and it was fun. I looked forward to doing these mundane tasks, but because of this bike, they became a part of my cycling life. So now that I've bored you with my sob story about why I love this bike so much, let's get into the actual bike itself. If you've ever ridden a cargo bike or a cargo e-bike, they often don't ride like normal bikes. This bike does ride like a normal bike. You can lean it in a corner. It's very maneuverable. It's very intuitive. It steers very much like a normal bike. Whereas a lot of other cargo e-bikes, you're kind of behind it. Whereas with this bike, you still feel very much on top of it, in it, like you would almost a normal bike. The other thing that it has is very powerful brakes. This thing loaded up to 400 pounds with me on it, I can still use one finger on the brake, going down a hill, stopping, not an issue. For me, the brakes were a big plus on this bike. The Haul is a Class 3 e-bike, which means that it is pedal assisted up to 28 miles an hour, which is great in my opinion. It allows riders to keep up with traffic, be more confident in taking a lane, particularly in the suburbs where speed limits are lower. Typically, when I'm riding this bike, a medium level of assist, it sort of likes to stay at somewhere between 22 to 25 miles an hour. I find to be very comforting, especially when I'm sharing the road with cars. Specialized equipped the Haul with a very big hub motor. In fact, it's called the Big Motor. It puts out about 700 watts at peak output, which is quite a lot. One of the benefits of a hub motor is it delivers power directly to the rear wheel, which on a fully loaded bike acts as a very good stabilizing force, particularly when starting from a stop. You have that full peak power output going to the rear wheel, which helps to stabilize the bike at low speeds. Traditionally, hub motors have been considered kind of a cheaper alternative to the mid-drive motor, which bikes like the Turn GSD uses. For me, mid-drive, hub drive, it doesn't really matter that much. Maybe the hub drive motor is a little bit harder to fix a flat on than a mid-drive, but at the end of the day, the difference is very minor. I think Specialized went with the hub motor to save a little bit on cost. If it saves riders a bit of money in the end, I think it's a good thing. But with that big motor, you need a very large battery, and Specialized put together a very large battery for this bike. Your e-bike range is going to vary on the level of assist you use, how big you are, how much weight you're carrying, how hilly your ride is. All those factors are going to change the amount of mileage you can get out of the Haul. I have routinely done 30, 35, 40 miles on this bike on one charge, carrying quite a bit of cargo with no real issues. A lot of brands will say this. We designed this bike from the ground up, but Specialized designed this from the wheels up. So these are 20-inch wheels with, I believe, 3.5-inch tires. Pretty big tire, pretty small wheel. But what it does is it lowers the center of gravity. So these racks that the pannier is attached to are very low to the ground, which means the center of gravity and all the weight is low to the ground, and it's centered around the wheels. That allows the haul to feel a lot more natural when it's fully loaded and a lot more controlled. So this allows the haul to be this small, but still be able to carry as much as a longer long-tail bike. When it's fully loaded, you do have to ride it a little bit differently, just because the bike is so much heavier. You feel like you're riding the bike a little bit in slow motion, but overall, if you have to slam on the brakes, it doesn't take significantly longer to stop. The brakes are very powerful. Kind of another reason why this was Bike of the Year for us was actually price. The haul is actually reasonably priced compared to other bikes in the category. Standard accessories include lights, fenders, and this rear rack. The lights on this bike are very, very good. This front light puts out a peak of 1500 lumens, which is roughly how bright car high beams are. These fenders are actually very, very good. These are probably some of the best stock fenders that I've tested. A lot of fenders, they look like they're doing something, but then they like stop here and then you just get sprayed constantly. Other things are extra. I understand why folks might be a little bit annoyed at having to spend a bit extra on accessories to get the bike maybe, let's say, fully cargo capable. But the reality is not everybody's gonna use this bike in the same way. So it actually makes sense to sell the bike bare and allow riders to then customize after purchase. So the way I have it set up, it is priced at just a little bit above $3,400 with the front rack, the basket, the hard pannier cases that we use to haul stuff. If you wanted to set it up to carry a kid, there are two options. For kids under 5, Specialized recommends a child seat, which you can mount directly to the rear rack. For kids over 5, they make a passenger kit, and the rear rack can support up to about 90 pounds. The essential accessories I would recommend for anyone that is considering the haul would definitely be the front rack and the front basket, which is actually, if you want, you can make it into a rear basket. I don't often use the word fun to describe a bike in a review because it's kind of a duh thing, but cargo e-bikes don't always tend to be fun to ride. They're more concerned with being practical. And so when I got on this bike, that's kind of what I was expecting, but this bike just handles really, really well, surprisingly well. It's a heavy bike, but it doesn't ride like one. It has very direct steering. It's very zippy. It's very maneuverable, especially at low speeds. You can kind of turn it around very easily. It never feels like it wants to fall over, even at low speeds. It's very well balanced. It just rides like a much, much, much lighter, much faster bike than it is. While I really, really love this bike, it's not perfect. No bike is. Two main issues with the haul. One is it's a heavy bike. With just the standard accessories on it, it's 77 pounds. You know, this might not be a super feasible bike if you live on the second floor because it's gonna be really tough to get it up and down stairs. And at that point, it's probably gonna inhibit you from using the bike all the time, which is kind of the point of this, is that you use this on a daily basis. One thing that sort of counteracts the weight and why I think the haul is still a little bit exceptional is because it's so small, it's actually relatively well balanced, and there's this great crossbar right here, which is perfectly kind of centers where the weight is. While it's not easy to pick up a 77-pound bike, when you do, it makes it relatively doable compared to other bikes. The second criticism of the haul, applies to most cargo e-bikes, is it's one size fits most. We've had testers on this bike that are 5'2", and we've had testers on their bike that are 6'2". And both have had good experiences. Both have said the bike rides very well. For context, I'm 6 foot. This bike fits me very well. I'm very comfortable on it. So if you're kind of in that average height range, probably not an issue. But if you're very short or you're very tall, it's worth test riding before you buy. I personally want bikes like this to become more popular. They allow folks to basically get things done that they normally need a car for, but it takes up a bike-size amount of space rather than a car-size amount of space. Bikes like this are really good for the world overall, but they're also just really fun and they add more bike miles to your life. I've had this bike for a few months. I've ridden roughly 800 miles on it. Those are all miles that I would have normally driven for, and it makes me look forward to doing errands, like things that I considered a chore. This bike makes fun because it transforms those trips that would have normally been done in a car into a bike ride. That's kind of why we love this bike. That's why it's Bike of the Year. And it's also why we're probably gonna do a lot more coverage of bikes like this in the future. So if there's a e-cargo bike out there that you enjoy, let me know in the comments.